The dawn of Iberia. When Phoenicians and Celts first stepped ashore, imagine a land where mountains rise like jagged teeth against the horizon, where rivers carve their way through ancient rock, and where the sea whispers secrets to those who dare listen. This is the Iberian Peninsula, a rugged and untamed corner of Europe that would one day become Spain. But long before kingdoms rose or empires fell, this land was home to tribes and travelers, each leaving their mark on its soil. It was here, in this wild expanse, that the story of Spain began. A tale woven from the threads of countless cultures, conflicts, and dreams. The earliest chapters of Iberia's history are painted with the footprints of wanderers. Around 1,200 years before the Common Era, the first great seafarers arrived. They came not as conquerors, but as traders, seeking wealth and new routes across the Mediterranean. These were the Phoenicians, masters of the sea, whose ships sliced through waves like knives. Drawn by the promise of precious metals, they founded colonies along the southern coast, naming one of their most important settlements Gadir, what we now call Cadiz. To them, this land was a treasure trove, rich with silver and gold, but also fertile ground for agriculture and commerce. Yet the Phoenicians were not alone in their discovery. Farther inland, another people had already claimed the peninsula as their own. These were the Celts, fierce warriors and skilled farmers who lived in harmony with nature. They worshipped gods tied to the earth, sky, and water, believing that every tree and stone held a spirit. Unlike the Phoenicians, who built cities and traded goods, the Celts preferred a more nomadic existence, moving with the seasons and tending to their herds. Their presence gave Iberia a dual identity, one rooted in the sophistication of maritime trade, and another steeped in the primal rhythms of the natural world. Over time, these two worlds collided, blending in ways both subtle and profound. The Phoenicians introduced the Celts to iron tools, which revolutionized farming and warfare. In return, the Celts shared their knowledge of the land, teaching the newcomers how to navigate its forests and rivers. Together, they created something unique, a hybrid culture that reflected the best of both traditions. Along the coast, bustling ports thrived, while farther inland, small villages dotted the landscape, each contributing to the growing tapestry of Iberian life. But the arrival of the Phoenicians and Celts was only the beginning. By the 8th century before the Common Era, word of Iberia's riches had spread far beyond the Mediterranean. Another group of seafarers set their sights on this distant land, the Greeks. Unlike the Phoenicians, who sought trade, the Greeks brought with them a hunger for settlement and expansion. They established colonies such as Emporion, near modern-day Catalonia, introducing new ideas about governance, philosophy, and art. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Iberia might become a Greek stronghold, but geography and politics conspired against them. Meanwhile, tensions simmered between the various groups vying for control. The Phoenicians viewed the Greeks as rivals, while the native Celtiberians, descendants of the Celts, watched warily as outsiders carved up their homeland. Conflicts erupted sporadically, fought with crude weapons and fueled by misunderstandings. Yet despite these clashes, there remained an underlying current of cooperation. Trade routes crisscrossed the peninsula, connecting coastal cities to mountain villages, and goods flowed freely from hand to hand. As centuries passed, the face of Iberia continued to change. Around 500 years before the Common Era, yet another power entered the scene: the Carthaginians. Descendants of the Phoenicians, they inherited their ancestors' love of the sea and their thirst for conquest. Under the leadership of Hamilcar Barca, and later his son Hannibal, Carthage expanded its influence across the western Mediterranean. Iberia became a crucial battleground in their rivalry with Rome, a conflict that would shape the course of history. For the people of Iberia, the arrival of the Carthaginians marked a turning point. No longer could they remain isolated from the wider world. They were now players in a game of empires. Some chose to ally themselves with Carthage, hoping to gain protection and prosperity. Others resisted, determined to preserve their independence. Villages burned, fields lay fallow, and families fled as armies marched back and forth across the peninsula. It was a chaotic and uncertain time, but it laid the foundation for what was to come. Through all of this, the spirit of Iberia endured. Its people adapted, survived, and thrived, drawing strength from their diverse heritage. The Phoenicians had taught them the value of trade, the Celts the importance of community, and the Greeks the power of ideas. Each contribution added a layer to the peninsula's identity, creating a mosaic of cultures that defied easy definition. And so, as the sun set over the rocky cliffs of Iberia, casting long shadows across its valleys and plains, the stage was set for the next act in its story. Empires would rise and fall, kings would claim thrones, and battles would be fought. But the essence of this land, a blend of resilience, diversity, and determination, would remain unchanged. This was the dawn of Iberia, a land poised to play a pivotal role in the history of the world. Rome's southern jewel. How Hispania became an empire. Within an empire. Imagine a land teeming with untapped potential, its hills glittering with veins of silver and its fields ripe with grain. This was Hispania, the Iberian Peninsula, as it came to be known under Roman rule, a prize coveted by one of history's greatest empires. In 215 years before the Common Era, Roman legions first set foot on this soil, their sandals crunching against dry earth as they surveyed the horizon. What began as a quest for riches would evolve into something far greater, the transformation of Hispania into a cornerstone of the Roman Empire. The Romans did not arrive uninvited. Their presence was the result of strategic necessity, born out of conflict with Carthage during the Second Punic War. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general whose name struck fear into Roman hearts, had used Hispania as a base to launch his audacious campaign against Italy. To counter this threat, Rome turned its gaze westward, determined to cut off Hannibal's supply lines and secure its dominance over the Mediterranean. The conquest of Hispania was not merely a military objective, it was a statement of intent. At first, the Romans encountered fierce resistance. The Celtiberians, descendants of the Celts who had settled centuries earlier, were skilled warriors who fought with tenacity and cunning. Armed with swords and spears, they defended their lands with a ferocity that caught the invaders off guard. Battles raged across the peninsula, from the lush valleys of the Ebro River to the rugged peaks of the Pyrenees. Yet, for all their bravery, the Celtiberians could not withstand the relentless advance of Rome's disciplined armies. One by one, their strongholds fell, and the Roman standard, the eagle, was planted firmly in Hispanian soil. By 197 years before the Common Era, Rome declared victory, dividing the peninsula into two provinces, Hispania Citerior to the north and Hispania Ulterior to the south. But conquest was only the beginning. The true challenge lay in governance, in transforming a conquered people into loyal subjects. The Romans approached this task with characteristic pragmatism. They built roads to connect distant regions, constructed aqueducts to bring fresh water to growing cities, and introduced legal systems that promised order and stability. Slowly but surely, Hispania began to resemble the heartland of Rome itself. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The Celtiberians and other native tribes had not forgotten their heritage or their struggle for freedom. Uprisings erupted sporadically, often sparked by grievances over taxation or forced conscription into the Roman army. Perhaps the most famous of these revolts was the Lusitanian War, led by a charismatic chieftain named Viriathus. For nearly 8 years, Viriathus waged a guerrilla campaign against Roman forces, striking swiftly and vanishing into the mountains before his enemies could retaliate. His exploits earned him a place in legend, but ultimately, betrayal sealed his fate. Assassinated by his own men at the behest of Roman officials, Viriathus became a martyr for the cause of independence. Despite such rebellions, the process of Romanization continued unabated. Over time, many Hispanians embraced Roman culture, adopting Latin as their language and participating in the empire's political and economic systems. Cities like Tarraco, modern-day Tarragona, and Emerita Augusta, Merida, flourished, becoming centers of trade, education, and administration. Amphitheaters rose where once there had been open fields, and temples dedicated to Roman gods stood alongside older shrines to local deities. The fusion of traditions created a unique cultural identity, one that reflected both the grandeur of Rome and the enduring spirit of Hispania. Perhaps no figure better exemplifies this synthesis than Trajan, born in Italica in 53 years after the Common Era. A native of Hispania, he rose through the ranks of Roman society to become emperor, ruling from 98 to 114 years after the Common Era. Under his leadership, the empire reached its greatest territorial extent, stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. Trajan's reign is remembered for its achievements in architecture, law, and military conquest, but it also underscores the importance of Hispania within the Roman world. Another notable figure was Hadrian, Trajan's successor, who hailed from the same region and whose legacy includes the iconic wall in northern England. Together, these emperors demonstrated that Hispania was not merely a province, it was a vital contributor to the fabric of the empire. As the centuries passed, Hispania grew increasingly integrated into the Roman system. Senators from the peninsula took their seats in the imperial capital, while poets and philosophers added their voices to the intellectual currents of the age. Lucan, Martial, and Seneca, all products of Hispanian upbringing, left indelible marks on literature and thought. Their works reflect the duality of their existence. Proud of their roots, yet fully immersed in the cosmopolitan culture of Rome. Yet even as Hispania prospered, cracks began to appear in the foundation of the empire. By the 3rd century after the Common Era, internal strife and external pressures weakened Rome's grip on its vast territories. Barbarian tribes pressed against its borders, while economic instability sowed discontent among its citizens. In Hispania, these challenges manifested in the form of declining infrastructure and reduced trade. Roads fell into disrepair, aqueducts ceased to function, and once thriving cities shrank in size and influence. Still, Hispania remained steadfastly Roman until the very end. When the Visigoths swept across the peninsula in the early 5th century, they found a population deeply rooted in Roman traditions. Though the Western Roman Empire officially collapsed in 476, its legacy endured in Hispania, shaping the course of its future. The language, laws, and customs introduced by Rome would continue to influence the region for centuries to come, serving as a bridge between ancient and medieval worlds. Thus, Hispania stands as a testament to the transformative power of empire. It was neither wholly Roman nor entirely indigenous, but rather a blend of both. A jewel polished by the hands of conquerors and natives alike. Through triumph and tragedy, prosperity and decline, it remained a vital part of the Roman world, contributing to its greatness even as it forged its own destiny. And so, as the sun set on the Roman Empire, casting its final rays over the hills and rivers of Hispania, the seeds of a new chapter were already taking root. Visigoths and Vandals, the fall of Rome, and the rise of new kingdoms. Imagine a world unraveling at its seams, where the mighty columns of an empire once thought eternal begin to crumble under the weight of time. This was the reality of the 5th century, as the Western Roman Empire succumbed to internal decay and external pressures. In Hispania, the collapse of Roman authority left a vacuum, a void that would soon be filled by new arrivals from the north and east. Among them were the Visigoths, a Germanic people whose journey across Europe had been marked by struggle, survival, and ambition. Their arrival in Hispania signaled the dawn of a new era, one defined by shifting allegiances, fragile kingdoms, and the slow erosion of Roman influence. The Visigoths first entered history's stage in the 4th century, when they crossed the Danube River seeking refuge from the Huns, a nomadic horde that had displaced countless tribes. Initially welcomed as allies by the Romans, the Visigoths quickly found themselves mistreated and marginalized, their warriors reduced to mercenaries fighting for scraps of land and promises of autonomy. Tensions boiled over in 378, culminating in the Battle of Adrianople, where the Visigothic leader Fritigern dealt a devastating blow to Roman forces. Though peace treaties followed, the relationship between the Visigoths and Rome remained fraught with mistrust. By 410, the Visigoths, now led by Alaric, had grown bold enough to sack the city of Rome itself, an event that sent shockwaves throughout the Mediterranean world. Yet plunder alone could not sustain them. What they sought was a homeland, a place where they could settle and rebuild. Under their next ruler, Ataulf, the Visigoths migrated westward, eventually establishing a foothold in Gaul before turning their attention to Hispania. By 417, they had claimed the region as their own, founding a kingdom centered around the city of Toledo. But ruling Hispania proved no easy task. The peninsula was a patchwork of peoples and traditions, its population still deeply tied to Roman customs, despite the empire's decline. To consolidate power, the Visigoths adopted many aspects of Roman governance, blending their warrior ethos with the administrative sophistication of their predecessors. They issued laws, minted coins, and even converted to Christianity, though initially adhering to Arianism, a branch of the faith deemed heretical by the Catholic Church. Over time, however, the Visigoths embraced Catholicism, aligning themselves more closely with the majority of their subjects and solidifying their legitimacy as rulers. Yet stability eluded them. The Visigothic kingdom was plagued by internal divisions, as rival factions vied for control of the throne. Succession disputes often erupted into violence, with kings rising and falling like leaves caught in a storm. One particularly tumultuous period occurred during the reign of Leovigild, who ruled from 569 to 586. Determined to unify his fractured realm, Leovigild waged war against rebellious tribes and neighboring powers, expanding the kingdom's borders and strengthening its institutions. He also commissioned grand architectural projects, including the construction of palaces and churches, leaving behind a legacy of both conquest and culture. Despite such efforts, the Visigothic kingdom remained vulnerable to external threats. Chief among these were the Byzantines, who sought to reclaim parts of Hispania for the Eastern Roman Empire. In 552, Emperor Justinian dispatched an expeditionary force to the southeastern coast, establishing a foothold in territories including Cartagena. For decades, the Byzantine presence loomed large, complicating Visigothic ambitions and sowing discord among local populations. It wasn't until the late 6th century, under King Sisebut, that the Visigoths managed to expel the Byzantines entirely, reclaiming full sovereignty over the peninsula. Even then, challenges persisted. Economic hardships weighed heavily on the kingdom, exacerbated by poor harvests, plagues, and the depletion of natural resources. Social hierarchies grew increasingly rigid, with a small elite dominating politics and wealth, while the majority struggled to survive. Religious tensions simmered beneath the surface as debates over doctrine and practice divided clergy and laity alike. Meanwhile, external enemies continued to pose a threat. The Vascones, ancestors of modern Basques, resisted Visigothic rule in the northern mountains, while Muslim armies began gathering strength just beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. Perhaps the most infamous chapter in Visigothic history unfolded in 711, when a coup d'état brought Roderick to the throne. His ascension was controversial, sparking outrage among rival noble families who felt slighted by his rise. Sensing weakness, Umayyad forces from North Africa seized the opportunity to invade, landing near present-day Tarifa. At the Battle of Guadalete, Roderick's army suffered a crushing defeat, opening the door for Muslim expansion across the peninsula. Within a few short years, nearly all of Hispania lay under Islamic control, marking the end of Visigothic dominance. And yet, the Visigoths left an indelible mark on the land they called home. Their legal codes, known collectively as the Liber Judiciorum, Book of Judgments, laid the groundwork for future systems of justice. Their embrace of Catholicism helped shape the religious identity of the peninsula, influencing generations to come. Most importantly, their story serves as a reminder of the fragility of power and the resilience of those who seek to build anew in the face of adversity. As the last Visigothic king fled into obscurity, the stage was set for another dramatic transformation. Hispania, now renamed Al-Andalus by its new rulers, would enter a golden age of innovation and cultural exchange. But the echoes of the Visigothic kingdom lingered, woven into the fabric of the land and its people. Through triumph and tragedy, prosperity and decline, Hispania continued to evolve, forever shaped by the hands of those who walked its soil. Al-Andalus, the golden age of Islam in Spain. Picture a land bathed in sunlight, where olive groves stretch endlessly toward the horizon and the scent of orange blossoms fills the air. This was Al-Andalus, a name that conjures images of splendor, scholarship, and sophistication. A realm where science, art, and philosophy flourished under the banner of Islam. From its inception in 711 to its gradual decline centuries later, Al-Andalus stood as a beacon of enlightenment in medieval Europe, a place where cultures intertwined and knowledge transcended boundaries. It was here, in the heart of what is now Spain, that one of history's most remarkable civilizations took root. The story of Al-Andalus begins with conquest. In 711, an Umayyad army led by Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, landing on a towering rock that would bear his name, Jabal Tariq, or Gibraltar. Their arrival marked the beginning of Muslim rule in Hispania, a development few could have foreseen. At the time, the Visigothic kingdom was rife with internal strife, its leaders embroiled in power struggles that left the realm vulnerable. When Roderick, the last Visigothic king, faced Tariq's forces at the Battle of Guadalete, his defeat sealed the fate of his dynasty and opened the door for a new era to unfold. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Over the next several decades, Muslim armies consolidated their control over the peninsula, establishing a province initially governed from Damascus as part of the vast Umayyad Caliphate. By 756, however, political upheaval in the Islamic world transformed Al-Andalus into something unique. Abd al-Rahman Fuhd, a survivor of the Abbasid massacre of the Umayyad family, fled to Hispania and declared himself Emir of Córdoba. Under his leadership, Al-Andalus emerged as an independent entity, free from the constraints of distant caliphs and poised to carve out its own destiny. Córdoba became the jewel of this nascent state, a city that would come to rival Baghdad and Constantinople in wealth and influence. By the 10th century, it boasted a population of over 500,000 inhabitants, making it one of the largest urban centers in the world. Its streets teemed with life, merchants haggling over silks and spices, scholars debating theology and astronomy, artisans crafting intricate mosaics and manuscripts. At the heart of the city stood the great Mosque of Córdoba, a masterpiece of Islamic architecture whose horseshoe arches and red and white striped columns symbolized the grandeur of Al-Andalus. Yet Córdoba was more than just a hub of commerce and culture. It was also a center of learning. During the reign of Abd al-Rahman III, who proclaimed himself caliph in 929, Al-Andalus entered its golden age. Libraries brimmed with texts translated from Greek, Latin, Persian, and Sanskrit, preserving the wisdom of antiquity while advancing new ideas. Scholars like Averroes, Ibn Rushd, and Maimonides challenged conventional thinking, their works influencing not only the Islamic world, but also Christian Europe during the Renaissance. Medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy thrived, driven by a spirit of inquiry that knew no bounds. This intellectual flowering was matched by advancements in agriculture and technology. Engineers designed sophisticated irrigation systems, turning arid landscapes into fertile fields capable of sustaining large populations. New crops, rice, sugarcane, citrus fruits were introduced, revolutionizing diets and economies. Artisans perfected techniques in metallurgy, ceramics, and textiles, producing goods coveted across continents. Al-Andalus became synonymous with innovation, a testament to human ingenuity unleashed. But perhaps the most striking feature of Al-Andalus was its diversity. Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted in relative harmony, each contributing to the cultural tapestry of the region. This convivencia, or coexistence, was far from perfect. Tensions occasionally flared and discrimination persisted, but it represented a rare moment in history when mutual respect outweighed sectarian divides. Jewish poets wrote in Arabic, Christian architects blended Romanesque and Moorish styles, and Muslim jurists studied Roman law. Together, They created a society that celebrated pluralism rather than feared it. Despite these achievements, Al-Andalus was not immune to challenges. Internal divisions plagued the caliphate, particularly after the death of al-Mansur in 1003. His passing triggered a period of fragmentation as rival factions vied for power and regional governors declared independence. By 1130, the once mighty caliphate had dissolved into smaller kingdoms known as taifas, each struggling to maintain autonomy amidst external threats. Chief among these threats were the Christian kingdoms to the north. As Al-Andalus fragmented, the Reconquista gained momentum, fueled by religious fervor and territorial ambition. Battles raged across the peninsula, with cities changing hands multiple times. Yet even in decline, Al-Andalus retained its allure. The Almoravids and Almohads, Berber dynasties from North Africa, intervened periodically to restore order, leaving behind architectural marvels like the Giralda in Seville and the Alhambra in Granada. These structures stand today as enduring symbols of a civilization that refused to fade quietly into history. By 1492, the fall of Granada marked the end of Muslim rule in the Iberian Peninsula. The Nasrid dynasty, which had governed Granada for over 250 years, surrendered to Ferdinand and Isabella, bringing an epoch to a close. Yet, the legacy of Al-Andalus endures. Its contributions to science, art, and governance shaped not only Spain, but also the broader trajectory of Western civilization. Its lessons about tolerance and cooperation remain relevant in an increasingly interconnected world. As the sun set on Al-Andalus, casting long shadows over its palaces and gardens, the echoes of its golden age lingered. Poets continued to recite verses inspired by its beauty. Musicians played melodies born of its courts, and historians chronicled its triumphs and tragedies. Though the flags of Islam no longer flew above its cities, the spirit of Al-Andalus lived on, a reminder that even in darkness, light can shine brightly enough to leave an indelible mark. El Cid and the Reconquista, knights, castles, holy wars. Imagine a land divided, its soil stained with the blood of countless battles, its skies pierced by the cries of ravens circling above smoldering ruins. This was medieval Spain, a fractured realm caught between two worlds, one receding, the other advancing. At the heart of this struggle stood Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, better known as El Cid, a figure whose life became legend and whose name became synonymous with honor, valor, and resilience. His story is not just one man's journey. It is the story of the Reconquista itself, a centuries-long crusade to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule and restore it to Christendom. The term Reconquista evokes images of knights clad in armor, banners fluttering in the wind, and castles perched atop jagged cliffs. Yet the reality was far more complex than these romanticized depictions suggest. The Reconquista began not as a unified movement, but as a series of localized skirmishes, fought by Christian kingdoms that were themselves often at odds. By the 11th century, however, the tide had begun to turn. The fragmentation of Al-Andalus into smaller Taifa kingdoms weakened Muslim defenses, while the rise of powerful Christian rulers like Ferdinand IV of Leon and Castile provided the momentum needed to push southward. It was into this volatile landscape that El Cid was born around 1043 in the village of Vivar, near Burgos. From an early age, he distinguished himself as a skilled warrior and tactician, earning the respect of both allies and enemies. Known for his unwavering loyalty to his liege lords, at least until circumstances forced him to chart his own course, Rodrigo quickly rose through the ranks of the military elite. By 1079, he had been appointed commander of the king's troops, a position that brought him fame, but also made him a target of envy and intrigue. El Cid's fortunes shifted dramatically in 1081, when he found himself exiled from Castile under mysterious circumstances. Some accounts claim he was accused of embezzling funds meant for the crown, while others suggest political rivals orchestrated his downfall. Whatever the truth, exile marked a turning point in his life. Stripped of his titles and lands, Rodrigo sought refuge among the Muslim Taifa rulers, offering his services as a mercenary. It was during this period that he earned the title El Cid, derived from the Arabic word Sayyid, meaning lord or master. What sets El Cid apart from other figures of the Reconquista is his ability to navigate the blurred lines between friend and foe. He fought alongside Christians and Muslims alike, driven less by ideology than by pragmatism and personal ambition. In 1094, he captured the city of Valencia after a prolonged siege, establishing himself as an independent ruler. Though nominally aligned with the Christian cause, he governed Valencia with a degree of autonomy rarely seen in feudal Europe. Under his leadership, the city prospered, becoming a melting pot of cultures where Christians, Muslims, and Jews coexisted in uneasy harmony. Yet El Cid's achievements came at great cost. His campaigns left trails of destruction in their wake, displacing families and devastating communities. The Reconquista itself was marked by brutality on all sides, as sacred sites were desecrated, prisoners executed, and civilians slaughtered. For every victory celebrated in song, there were countless tragedies lost to history. Even El Cid, who has been immortalized as a paragon of chivalry, was not immune to the darker impulses of his time. Despite these complexities, El Cid remains a symbol of perseverance in the face of adversity. When he died in 1099, his body was placed astride his horse Babieca and led into battle one final time, a testament to his enduring legacy. Valencia eventually fell to Almoravid forces, but El Cid's exploits inspired future generations of Christian warriors to continue the fight for Iberia. The Reconquista reached its zenith nearly 4 centuries later, culminating in the fall of Granada in 1492. Under the leadership of Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, the last Muslim stronghold in Spain surrendered, bringing an end to over 700 years of conflict. Yet the victory was bittersweet. While the Reconquista fulfilled its goal of expelling Muslim rulers from the peninsula, it also paved the way for the Inquisition and the expulsion of Jews and Muslims, acts that tarnished Spain's reputation and sowed seeds of discord that would haunt the nation for centuries. Still, the Reconquista cannot be reduced to a simple narrative of triumph or tragedy. It was a multifaceted process shaped by religion, politics, economics, and culture. Alongside the clashing of swords and the toppling of fortresses, there were moments of cooperation and exchange. Muslim scholars preserved ancient Greek texts that would later fuel the Renaissance, while Jewish translators bridged linguistic divides between East and West. Even in war, humanity found ways to connect. El Cid's story encapsulates this duality. He was neither wholly hero nor villain, neither conqueror nor conciliator. Instead, he embodied the contradictions of his age, a warrior poet who fought for glory yet yearned for peace, a loyal subject who became a rebel, a Christian knight who earned the admiration of Muslims. Through his life, we glimpse the intricate web of alliances and animosities that defined medieval Spain. As the dust settled on the Reconquista and the banners of Castile and Aragon waved triumphantly across the peninsula, Spain emerged transformed. Its people bore the scars of centuries of strife, but they also carried within them the resilience and adaptability that would shape their future. The Reconquista may have ended, but its echoes reverberated through the corridors of power, the pages of literature, and the collective memory of a nation. And at its center stood El Cid, a man whose name continues to evoke the spirit of a land forever caught between worlds. Columbus and the New World, how Spain redefined global power. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship, the salty breeze tugging at your clothes as you gaze out over an endless expanse of ocean. The horizon stretches before you, vast and unknowable, promising both peril and possibility. This was the world that Christopher Columbus entered on October 12th, 1492, when he landed on an island in the Caribbean, a moment that would forever alter the course of history. For Spain, this voyage marked the beginning of an era defined by exploration, conquest, and unprecedented global influence. It was a time when the small Iberian kingdom transformed itself into an empire on which the sun never set, reshaping continents, cultures, and civilizations in ways both profound and devastating. Columbus's journey was not born of spontaneous inspiration, but rather of careful calculation and relentless determination. Born in Genoa around 1451, Columbus grew up surrounded by tales of maritime adventure and the allure of distant lands. By his early 20s, he had honed his skills as a sailor, navigating the Mediterranean and Atlantic waters with growing confidence. Yet what set him apart was his vision, a belief that it was possible to reach Asia by sailing westward across the Atlantic. At a time when most Europeans assumed such a route was impossible, Columbus dared to challenge conventional wisdom. For years, he sought patronage from various European monarchs, pitching his idea with a mix of charm, conviction, and persistence. His breakthrough came in 1492, when Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs of Spain, agreed to fund his expedition. Their decision was motivated by more than mere curiosity. It was driven by ambition. Fresh from their victory in the Reconquista, they saw Columbus's proposal as an opportunity to expand Spain's wealth and prestige, securing its place on the global stage. When Columbus's fleet, comprising the Niña, Pinta, and Santa Maria, set sail from Palos de la Frontera on August 3, 1492, few could have predicted the magnitude of what lay ahead. After weeks of tense navigation, land finally appeared on the horizon, an island Columbus named San Salvador. Though he believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, he had instead stumbled upon the Americas, initiating a chain reaction that would ripple across centuries. The impact of Columbus's voyages cannot be overstated. In the decades that followed, Spain embarked on a campaign of exploration and colonization that brought immense riches and staggering costs. Gold and silver flowed into Seville by the ton, mined from places like Potosí in present-day Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico. These precious metals fueled Spain's economy, enabling it to finance wars, construct grand cathedrals, and project power across Europe. But they also created dependencies, fostering inflation and economic instability that would plague the nation in later centuries. Spain's colonial enterprise was not limited to resource extraction. It extended to cultural transformation as well. Missionaries accompanied conquistadors, seeking to convert indigenous populations to Christianity. Cities like Mexico City and Lima rose from the ashes of ancient civilizations, blending European and native traditions in architecture, art, and governance. Meanwhile, Spanish became the lingua franca of much of the Americas, a legacy that endures to this day. Yet behind these achievements lay a darker reality. The arrival of Europeans triggered catastrophic consequences for indigenous peoples. Diseases like smallpox decimated populations lacking immunity, while forced labor systems like the encomienda reduced survivors to servitude. Entire civilizations, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Taíno, were shattered, their histories erased or rewritten through the lens of conquerors. Resistance simmered beneath the surface, erupting in rebellions that were often brutally suppressed. Among the most infamous figures of this period was Hernán Cortés, whose conquest of the Aztec Empire in 1519 remains a subject of fascination and controversy. With fewer than 600 men, Cortés toppled one of the most advanced societies of the pre-Columbian Americas, exploiting internal divisions and wielding superior weaponry. Similarly, Francisco Pizarro's defeat of the Inca Empire in 1533 demonstrated the devastating efficiency of Spanish tactics. Both campaigns were marked by acts of cruelty and betrayal, underscoring the moral ambiguities of Spain's imperial ambitions. Despite, or perhaps because of, these contradictions, Spain's dominance in the New World solidified its status as a global superpower. By the mid-16th century, it controlled territories spanning from California to Patagonia, from Florida to the Philippines. Its galleons crisscrossed the oceans, linking continents in a network of trade and exchange. Yet maintaining such an empire required constant vigilance and resources. Pirates, rival powers, and internal dissent posed ongoing threats, forcing Spain to invest heavily in defense and diplomacy. One of the most dramatic examples of these challenges occurred in 1588, when King Philip II launched the Spanish Armada against England. Designed to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I and reassert Catholic supremacy, the mission ended in disaster. Storms scattered the fleet, English fire ships wreaked havoc, and thousands of sailors perished. The defeat humiliated Spain and signaled the limits of its naval might, though it did not immediately diminish its empire. By the 17th century, cracks began to appear in Spain's dominance. Economic mismanagement, over-reliance on imported wealth, and costly wars weakened the nation's foundations. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1713 further eroded its territorial holdings, ceding Gibraltar and other key locations to Britain. Still, the legacy of Spain's Golden Age endured, shaping the identities of nations and the contours of modern geopolitics. As the echoes of cannon fire faded and the maps of empires were redrawn, Spain's role in the world shifted once again. What remained was a complex inheritance, a tale of triumph and tragedy, innovation and exploitation, unity and division. Through figures like Columbus, Cortés, and countless others, Spain had redefined what it meant to be a global power. And yet, the human cost of that achievement serves as a sobering reminder of the responsibilities that come with wielding such influence. Today, the story of Columbus and the New World continues to resonate, provoking debates about history, identity, and justice. Was Spain's rise an inevitable consequence of ambition and ingenuity? Or was it a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked greed and hubris? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between, a reflection of humanity's capacity for greatness and folly, intertwined like threads in the fabric of time. The Habsburg Dynasty, a throne built on war and religion. Imagine a throne that spans continents, its reach stretching from the sun-drenched plains of Spain to the icy peaks of the Austrian Alps, from the bustling ports of the Americas to the fortified cities of the Low Countries. This was the Habsburg Empire, a sprawling dominion stitched together by marriage, diplomacy, and bloodshed. At its helm stood two of history's most formidable rulers, Charles V and Philip II, whose reigns transformed Spain into the epicenter of European power. Yet for all their grandeur, the Habsburgs' legacy is one of paradox, an empire on which the sun never set, yet perpetually shadowed by war, religion, and the weight of its own ambition. The Habsburg dynasty's ascent began with a marriage alliance that would shape the course of history. In 1496, Joanna of Castile, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, wed Philip the Handsome, heir to the Burgundian Netherlands and the Holy Roman Empire. Their union forged a bond between two of Europe's most influential families, laying the groundwork for a dynastic juggernaut. When Joanna's brother died without issue, her son Charles inherited not only the crowns of Castile and Aragon, but also the vast territories of the Habsburgs, including the Netherlands, Austria, and parts of Italy. By 1519, he had been elected Holy Roman Emperor, making him ruler of lands so extensive they encompassed much of Western Europe. Charles V took the throne at a time when the continent teetered on the brink of upheaval. The Protestant Reformation, ignited by Martin Luther's 95 Theses in 1517, threatened to unravel centuries of Catholic hegemony. For Charles, a devout Catholic who saw himself as the defender of Christendom, this posed both a spiritual and political crisis. Determined to crush dissent, he waged wars against Protestant princes within the Holy Roman Empire while simultaneously fending off external threats. His campaigns drained Spain's treasury, but secured his reputation as a champion of the faith. Yet Charles's ambitions extended beyond Europe. Under his rule, Spain solidified its grip on the New World, establishing colonies and exploiting resources to fund his military endeavors. Gold and silver poured into Seville, fueling an economy that bankrolled battles across the globe. But wealth alone could not sustain such an expansive empire. Administrative inefficiencies, logistical challenges, and widespread resentment among local populations undermined Spain's ability to govern effectively. Even Charles himself grew weary of the relentless demands placed upon him. In 1556, he abdicated, dividing his realm between his brother Ferdinand, who assumed leadership of the Holy Roman Empire, and his son Philip, who inherited the Spanish crown. Philip II ascended to power with a vision of absolute authority. Unlike his father, who traveled constantly to oversee his far-flung domains, Philip chose to remain in Spain, ruling from the Escorial, a massive monastery palace that embodied his austere piety and centralized approach to governance. He believed fervently in the divine right of kings, viewing himself as God's instrument on earth. This conviction guided every decision he made, whether it involved waging war, suppressing rebellion, or enforcing religious orthodoxy. Religion became the cornerstone of Philip's reign. During his lifetime, Spain emerged as the bastion of Catholicism, leading the Counter-Reformation effort to counteract Protestant influence. The Council of Trent, convened under papal authority, sought to reform the Church from within while reaffirming its core doctrines. Meanwhile, the Spanish Inquisition intensified its activities, rooting out heresy with brutal efficiency. Jews and Muslims faced expulsion or forced conversion, their communities dismantled in the name of unity and purity. Though these measures bolstered Catholic dominance, they also sowed seeds of division, alienating segments of the population and stifling intellectual diversity. Philip's foreign policy reflected his uncompromising worldview. In 1580, he annexed Portugal following the death of King Sebastian, adding its overseas empire to Spain's already considerable holdings. This move temporarily strengthened Spain's position, but also stretched its resources thin. More significantly, Philip became embroiled in conflicts with England, France, and the Ottoman Empire, each of which challenged his supremacy. His attempt to invade England via the Spanish Armada in 1588 ended in humiliating defeat, exposing vulnerabilities in Spain's naval strategy and further straining its finances. Despite these setbacks, Philip left an indelible mark on Spain. His patronage of the arts and architecture produced enduring masterpieces, including El Greco's haunting paintings and the ornate splendor of the Escorial. His support for missionaries like St. Francis Xavier helped spread Catholicism to Asia and Africa, cementing Spain's role as a global evangelist. And his determination to defend the faith inspired generations of Spaniards to view themselves as guardians of Christendom. Yet the costs of Philip's reign were immense. Decades of warfare depleted Spain's coffers, forcing the crown to borrow heavily from foreign bankers. Economic stagnation set in as inflation soared, driven by the influx of American silver and a lack of productive investment. Social unrest simmered beneath the surface, erupting periodically in revolts like the Morisco uprising in Granada and the Comuneros rebellion earlier in the century. By the time Philip died in 1598, Spain's glory days appeared increasingly fragile, sustained more by inertia than innovation. The Habsburg dynasty continued to wield power long after Philip's death, but its trajectory was marked by decline. Successive rulers struggled to maintain control over their fragmented territories, hampered by weak leadership, fiscal mismanagement, and mounting resistance. The 30 Years' War, 1616–1648, epitomized these struggles, pitting Catholic and Protestant forces against one another in a devastating conflict that ravaged Central Europe. Though Spain initially played a key role in the fighting, its involvement ultimately weakened its position, hastening the erosion of its imperial might. By the late 17th century, Spain's star had dimmed considerably. Its once formidable navy had been eclipsed by rivals like England and the Dutch Republic, while its colonies faced increasing pressure from other European powers. Internally, corruption and inefficiency plagued the administration, leaving ordinary citizens disillusioned and impoverished. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1713 formalized Spain's diminished status, ceding Gibraltar, Minorca, and other strategic locations to Britain. And yet, even in decline, the Habsburg legacy endured. Their efforts to unify Spain under a single monarchy laid the foundation for modern nationhood, while their promotion of Catholicism shaped the cultural and religious identity of the peninsula. The Escorial stands today as a testament to their vision, its towering walls and solemn corridors reflecting both the majesty and the melancholy of an empire built on contradictions. As the sun finally set on the Habsburg era, casting long shadows over the kingdoms they had ruled, Spain found itself at a crossroads. The challenges it faced, Economic hardship, social unrest, and shifting geopolitical dynamics were daunting, but they also offered opportunities for renewal. From the ashes of empire, new possibilities arose, waiting to be seized by those bold enough to dream of a different future. The decline of an empire. Pirates, plague, and economic ruin. Imagine a kingdom once radiant with wealth and power, its streets bustling with merchants hawking silks and spices from distant lands, its cathedrals towering over cobblestone plazas as symbols of divine favor. This was Spain at the height of its Habsburg glory, a nation whose influence stretched across continents and whose coffers overflowed with gold and silver from the Americas. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity lay cracks that would soon widen into chasms. By the 17th century, Spain's decline had become undeniable. A slow unraveling driven by piracy, plague, economic mismanagement, and the sheer weight of its own ambitions. It was a fall as dramatic as its rise, a cautionary tale of how even the mightiest empires can falter under the strain of their own contradictions. The story of Spain's decline begins not with a single event, but with a cascade of challenges that compounded over decades. At the heart of these struggles was the Crown's reliance on American treasure to sustain its vast empire. While the influx of silver and gold initially fueled Spain's dominance, it also created dangerous dependencies. The economy became distorted, with imported wealth driving inflation to unsustainable levels. Known as the price revolution, this phenomenon made basic goods unaffordable for ordinary Spaniards, widening the gap between rich and poor. Meanwhile, local industries stagnated, unable to compete with cheaper imports from abroad. Instead of fostering productive investment, the Crown squandered its riches on wars, palaces, and foreign loans, leaving little for domestic development. Compounding these economic woes were external threats that exploited Spain's vulnerabilities. Pirates, both state-sponsored privateers and rogue adventurers, preyed on Spanish galleons laden with treasure, striking terror into the hearts of sailors and merchants alike. Among them was Sir Francis Drake, the English sea captain who became a thorn in Philip II's side. In 1587, Drake launched a daring raid on Cadiz, destroying ships and supplies destined for the ill-fated Spanish Armada. Such attacks not only disrupted trade, but also drained resources as Spain invested heavily in naval defenses that often proved ineffective. Disease further ravaged the population, compounding the misery wrought by war and poverty. The bubonic plague swept through Europe repeatedly during the 16th and 17th centuries, claiming millions of lives. Cities like Seville, once vibrant hubs of commerce, became ghost towns as outbreaks forced residents to flee or perish. Even rural areas were not spared. Entire villages were wiped out, leaving fields untended and livestock abandoned. The loss of life devastated Spain's workforce, crippling agriculture and manufacturing at a time when the economy could least afford such setbacks. Yet perhaps the most insidious factor in Spain's decline was its inability to adapt to changing circumstances. The rigid hierarchical structure of society, reinforced by the monarchy and the church, stifled innovation and discouraged dissent. Nobles clung to their privileges, resisting reforms that might have alleviated some of the burdens faced by commoners. Peasants, burdened by heavy taxes and feudal obligations, grew increasingly resentful, leading to sporadic uprisings that were brutally suppressed. Meanwhile, the Inquisition continued to enforce religious conformity, persecuting those deemed heretical and discouraging intellectual exploration. The consequences of these failures became painfully evident during the 30 Years' War, 1616–1648, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history. Initially drawn into the war to defend Catholic interests, Spain found itself embroiled in a protracted struggle that drained its resources and exposed its weaknesses. Battles raged across the Low Countries, Italy and Germany, with Spanish forces stretched thin and frequently outmaneuvered by more agile adversaries. By the time peace was negotiated in 1648, Spain's reputation as a dominant military power had been irreparably damaged. Economic collapse followed close behind. By the mid-17th century, Spain was mired in debt, borrowing heavily from foreign bankers to finance its operations. Default became alarmingly frequent, undermining confidence in the Crown's ability to govern effectively. Local economies suffered as tax revenues dwindled and public services deteriorated. Famine struck repeatedly, exacerbated by crop failures and logistical breakdowns. Desperation spread, giving rise to banditry and lawlessness in regions where authority had all but evaporated. Even the colonies, long considered sources of endless wealth, began to show signs of strain. Indigenous populations, decimated by disease and exploitation, struggled to meet labor demands. African slaves, brought in to fill the void, endured horrific conditions that sparked occasional revolts. Meanwhile, rival powers like England, France, and the Dutch Republic encroached on Spanish territories, challenging its monopoly over trade routes and resources. By the late 17th century, Spain's grip on the New World had loosened considerably, signaling the beginning of the end for its colonial empire. Amidst this turmoil, cultural and artistic achievements offered fleeting solace. Writers like Miguel de Cervantes captured the complexities of the age in works such as Don Quixote, blending satire and pathos to critique the societal norms of his time. Painters like Diego Velázquez immortalized the grandeur and decay of the Spanish court, their canvases reflecting both the splendor of empire and the shadows gathering around it. Yet even these triumphs could not mask the deeper malaise afflicting the nation. By 1713, the Treaty of Utrecht formally marked Spain's diminished status. Gibraltar fell to Britain, along with other strategic locations that underscored the erosion of Spanish power. What remained was a kingdom struggling to redefine itself in a rapidly changing world. The Habsburg dynasty ended with Charles II, whose death in 1700 triggered a succession crisis known as the War of the Spanish Succession. When Philip V, a Bourbon prince, ascended to the throne in 1714, he inherited a fractured realm desperate for renewal. Spain's decline serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of empires. For all its wealth and ambition, the nation could not escape the consequences of its choices. The prioritization of short-term gains over long-term stability, the suppression of dissent in favor of control, the neglect of internal needs in pursuit of external glory. Yet within this narrative of loss lies a glimmer of hope. From the ashes of empire, new possibilities emerged, shaped by resilience and reinvention. As the sun set on Spain's golden age, it cast light on paths yet untraveled, waiting to be forged by those willing to learn from the past and imagine a different future. From dictatorship to democracy, Franco's shadow and Spain's resurgence. Imagine a nation caught between the weight of its past and the promise of its future. Its streets lined with silent witnesses to decades of oppression and resilience. This was Spain under Francisco Franco, a country shaped by the iron grip of dictatorship, yet destined to emerge from the shadows into the light of democracy. The story of modern Spain is one of transformation, a journey from the ashes of civil war to the vibrant mosaic of cultures, ideals, and aspirations that defines it today. It is a tale of courage in the face of tyranny, reconciliation after division, and renewal amid ruin. The origins of Franco's regime lie in the Spanish Civil War, a brutal conflict that tore the nation apart from 1936 to 1939. Sparked by ideological divides between Republicans, supporters of the democratically elected government, and nationalists led by Franco, the war became a proxy battleground for larger global tensions. Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany backed Franco, while the Soviet Union supported the Republicans. What began as a domestic struggle evolved into an international spectacle, with atrocities committed on both sides leaving deep scars on the national psyche. By 1939, Franco's forces had triumphed, and he declared himself caudillo, leader for life. For nearly 4 decades, Franco ruled Spain with an authoritarian hand, suppressing dissent and enforcing a rigid vision of unity rooted in Catholicism, nationalism, and traditional values. Political opponents were imprisoned, exiled, or executed. Regional identities like those of Catalonia and the Basque Country were suppressed, and cultural expression was tightly controlled. The regime relied heavily on propaganda, portraying itself as the savior of Spain from chaos and communism. Yet beneath this facade of stability simmered discontent, particularly among younger generations yearning for freedom and modernity. Economically, Franco's early years were marked by hardship and isolation. The devastation wrought by the Civil War, coupled with Spain's exclusion from post-World War II institutions like the Marshall Plan, left the nation struggling to rebuild. However, by the late 1950s, a series of reforms known as the Desarrollo, development, ushered in a period of rapid industrialization and economic growth. Foreign investment flowed in, tourism boomed, and infrastructure projects transformed cities and rural areas alike. Madrid expanded with skyscrapers and highways, while coastal towns welcomed waves of visitors seeking sun and sand. For many Spaniards, this era brought newfound prosperity, but it also highlighted the contradictions of living under a dictatorship that stifled political freedoms while embracing capitalist development. Franco's death in 1975 marked a turning point. With no clear successor, Spain faced uncertainty about its future. King Juan Carlos V, whom Franco had designated as his heir, assumed the throne, but quickly distanced himself from the old regime. In a bold move, he appointed Adolfo Suarez as prime minister, tasking him with guiding Spain toward democracy. The transition, known as the Transición, was fraught with challenges. Deep divisions lingered between those who supported Franco's legacy and those who sought change. Regional separatist movements demanded greater autonomy, while remnants of the old guard resisted reform. Yet against all odds, Spain succeeded in crafting a new political order. In 1977, free elections were held for the first time in over 40 years, resulting in a centrist government committed to drafting a constitution. Approved in 1978, the document enshrined democratic principles, guaranteed fundamental rights, and granted significant autonomy to Spain's regions. It was a remarkable achievement, born of compromise and collective will. The road to full democracy was not without obstacles. A failed coup attempt in 1981, orchestrated by elements within the military unhappy with the direction of reform, tested the resilience of Spain's nascent institutions. But when King Juan Carlos appeared on television in uniform, condemning the insurgents and reaffirming his support for democracy, the plot collapsed. This moment solidified the monarchy's role as a stabilizing force during a turbulent period. As democracy took root, so too did efforts to address the wounds of the past. Historical memory became a focal point, with debates emerging about how to confront the atrocities of the Civil War and Francoist repression. Initiatives like the Law of Historical Memory, passed in 2007, sought to recognize victims and remove symbols of dictatorship from public spaces. While controversial, these measures reflected a broader societal reckoning with history, a recognition that moving forward required acknowledging the pain of the past. Culturally and socially, Spain underwent profound changes during this period. Freed from censorship, artists, writers, and filmmakers explored themes once forbidden, giving voice to marginalized perspectives and challenging traditional norms. Movements for gender equality, LGBTQ+ rights, and environmental protection gained momentum, reflecting a society increasingly open to diversity and inclusion. Cities like Barcelona and Bilbao emerged as global cultural capitals, their architecture and art redefining Spain's image on the world stage. Economically, Spain continued to thrive, joining the European Economic Community, now the European Union, in 1986. Membership facilitated further integration into the global economy, boosting trade, innovation, and living standards. Infrastructure projects like high-speed rail networks connected distant regions, fostering mobility and cohesion. education and healthcare systems improved, providing opportunities for millions. Yet challenges persisted. The global financial crisis of 2008 hit Spain hard, exposing vulnerabilities in its banking sector and labor market. Unemployment soared, particularly among youth, sparking protests and calls for systemic reform. Corruption scandals involving politicians and business leaders eroded trust in institutions, fueling demands for transparency and accountability. Regional tensions, especially in Catalonia, escalated, culminating in a contentious independence referendum in 2017 that deepened divisions. Despite these difficulties, Spain demonstrated remarkable adaptability. Grassroots movements like the Indignados, outraged ones, which inspired similar protests worldwide, highlighted citizens' desire for participatory governance. Renewable energy initiatives positioned Spain as a leader in sustainability, while technological advancements created new industries and opportunities. Above all, the spirit of resilience that had carried the nation through dictatorship and transition endured, driving efforts to build a fairer, more inclusive society. Today, Spain stands as a testament to the power of democracy and reconciliation. Its journey from dictatorship to democracy serves as a model for nations grappling with their own legacies of authoritarianism and conflict. Though challenges remain, the progress achieved since Franco's death underscores the potential for renewal even in the darkest of times. As Spain looks to the future, it does so with a sense of hope, tempered by experience. A reminder that freedom, like peace, requires constant vigilance and care. In the end, Franco's shadow may never fully disappear from Spain's landscape. His monuments may be dismantled, his name erased from streets and plaques, but the lessons of his era endure. They remind us of the fragility of liberty, the importance of justice, and the enduring strength of those who refuse to surrender to despair. And they affirm that even in the face of adversity, nations can rise, not unscathed, but wiser, stronger, and more determined than ever to shape their own destinies. Modern marvels: how Spain balances tradition and innovation. Imagine a country where ancient cathedrals stand alongside avant-garde skyscrapers, where flamenco dancers' passionate footwork echoes in the same cities that host cutting-edge tech startups. This is modern Spain, a nation that thrives on contrasts, seamlessly blending its rich history with bold innovation. In the 21st century, Spain has emerged as a vibrant mosaic of cultures, ideas, and aspirations, proving that tradition and progress are not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary forces. From Gaudi's unfinished Sagrada Familia to Barcelona's buzzing entrepreneurial hubs, Spain continues to redefine itself, balancing reverence for the past with an unyielding drive toward the future. At the heart of this duality lies Spain's cultural heritage, which remains a cornerstone of its identity. Nowhere is this more evident than in its architecture. Antoni Gaudi's masterpieces, such as the Sagrada Familia and Parc Güell, draw millions of visitors each year, their whimsical designs capturing the imagination of people from all walks of life. Yet these iconic structures coexist harmoniously with contemporary landmarks like the City of Arts and Sciences in Valencia, designed by Santiago Calatrava, or the shimmering titanium curves of Frank Gehry's Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. These buildings are not just feats of engineering. They symbolize Spain's ability to honor its artistic legacy while embracing new forms of expression. Spain's culinary scene tells a similar story of tradition meeting innovation. The country is renowned for its timeless dishes: paella from Valencia, jamón ibérico cured in mountain air, and pinzos served in Basque taverns. But it is also home to some of the world's most innovative chefs who have reimagined Spanish cuisine through the lens of molecular gastronomy. Ferran Adrià's El Bulli, once considered the best restaurant in the world, revolutionized how we think about food, turning dining into an experience that challenges the senses. Today, chefs like Joan Roca and Andoni Luis Aduriz carry this torch, pushing boundaries while staying rooted in local ingredients and techniques. This spirit of reinvention extends beyond culture and into the realm of technology and science. Spain has quietly become a leader in renewable energy, investing heavily in solar and wind power to combat climate change. Its commitment to sustainability is reflected in projects like the Gemma Solar Plant near Seville, one of the first solar power towers capable of generating electricity even after sunset. Similarly, Madrid and Barcelona have embraced smart city initiatives, using data and technology to improve urban living. From bike-sharing programs to apps that optimize public transportation, these innovations reflect a society determined to adapt to the demands of the modern age without sacrificing quality of life. Yet Spain's achievements are not limited to infrastructure and industry. The nation has also cultivated a thriving creative economy, leveraging its artistic roots to inspire new generations of filmmakers, musicians, and designers. Pedro Almodóvar, whose films explore themes of love, identity, and family, has brought Spanish cinema to global audiences, earning accolades at festivals worldwide. Musicians like Rosalía blend traditional flamenco with modern genres like pop and reggaeton, creating sounds that resonate across continents. Meanwhile, fashion designers like Agatha Ruiz de la Prada infuse their work with color and whimsy, celebrating Spain's joie de vivre on runways around the globe. Despite these successes, Spain faces significant challenges as it navigates the complexities of the 21st century. Economic inequality persists, particularly between urban centers and rural areas. Youth unemployment, though improved since the financial crisis of 2008, remains a pressing concern, prompting many young Spaniards to seek opportunities abroad. Regional tensions, especially in Catalonia, continue to simmer, raising questions about unity and autonomy within the Spanish state. And like much of Europe, Spain grapples with issues of immigration, integration, and social cohesion in an increasingly interconnected world. Yet what sets Spain apart is its resilience, a trait forged through centuries of struggle and triumph. When faced with adversity, Spaniards have consistently demonstrated an ability to come together, finding strength in their diversity and shared values. This was evident during the COVID-19 pandemic, when communities rallied to support one another despite lockdowns and uncertainty. It was also apparent in the aftermath of the devastating train derailment in Santiago de Compostela in 2013, when ordinary citizens rushed to aid victims, embodying the spirit of solidarity that defines the nation. Education plays a pivotal role in shaping Spain's future, equipping young people with the skills needed to thrive in a rapidly changing world. Universities like the Complutense University of Madrid and Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona rank among the best in Europe, attracting students and researchers from around the globe. Programs emphasizing STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, fields ensure that Spain remains competitive in industries ranging from biotechnology to aerospace. At the same time, efforts to preserve languages like Catalan, Galician, and Basque underscore a commitment to linguistic and cultural diversity, reinforcing the idea that innovation flourishes when multiple voices are heard. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of modern Spain is its capacity for reinvention. Whether through art, technology, or policy, the nation continually finds ways to evolve without losing sight of its essence. Festivals like La Tomatina in Buñol or Las Fallas in Valencia may seem quirky to outsiders, but they represent something deeper, a celebration of community, creativity, and joy. Similarly, events like the Running of the Bulls in Pamplona, though controversial, highlight Spain's willingness to engage critically with its traditions, preserving what is meaningful while questioning what no longer serves. As Spain looks ahead, it does so with confidence tempered by humility. The scars of dictatorship and economic hardship have taught the nation valuable lessons about the fragility of freedom and prosperity. Yet these experiences have also instilled a sense of purpose, a determination to build a society that is inclusive, dynamic, and forward-thinking. In the end, Spain's greatness lies not in any single achievement, but in its ability to weave together disparate threads into a cohesive whole. It is a land where history speaks to the present, where innovation honors tradition, and where diversity strengthens unity. As the sun sets over the Sierra Nevada or rises over the Mediterranean coast, casting light on olive groves, Gothic cathedrals, and sleek skyscrapers alike, one thing becomes clear: Spain is not merely surviving. It is thriving, crafting a narrative that is uniquely its own. And so, as the chapters of its history unfold, Spain reminds us that nations, like individuals, are defined not by their circumstances, but by their choices. To balance tradition and innovation, to embrace change without forgetting one's roots, is no small feat. But Spain has done so with grace, grit, and an unwavering belief in the possibilities of tomorrow. In doing so, it offers the world a vision of hope, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and resilience.